Hello and welcome to Midlife Men with me, Philip Briscoe. In this episode, my guest is Mark Bradshaw. Mark is a prominent voice highlighting the destructive impact of online gambling. From his own experience, he knows only too well what can happen when an addictive personality combines with a gambling addiction. So Mark, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So perhaps you want to start off by talking about how you were first exposed to gambling. How did it start?
So for me personally, at a very young age, so some of my earlier childhood memories of holidays by the seaside would have been formed around going up to the little 2p slot machines, sliding machines, and then a little later on going away on scout camps, going over to France and Germany and going on the ferries and playing in the little arcades as you were going. And there's some of my earliest memories of gambling, and actually would associate those holidays with that. So it was always something, the risk. I guess I wouldn't have looked at it as a risk element, but that kind of opportunity to win something always was something that interested me.
Even as a child, then there was that trigger. And so, how did? Go on.
No, and then as I started to go through my early teen years and had a love for sport and rugby, I was a rugby union player, but grew up in the rugby league heartlands and had a real passion for the rugby league. About 14, 15, would have gone down the bookies to put the handicap bets on the rugby leagues. I felt like I knew enough, have enough insight that I would go down and put the bets on it.
Okay. So and how did it evolve from then? You know, as you went into, further into your adolescence and, as you went into adulthood.
So the introduction to a casino. So again, that was done by a rugby club on a typical night out after a game on a Saturday. And somebody had said, "Oh, sure, we're going to go to the casino afterwards. Do you want to come?" I'd have been 18, got signed in. The process back then was you had to become a member yourself. There was a 24-hour cooling off period. So you join the casino and then there'd be a cooling off part afterwards. And I went in and played roulette and played blackjack and thought, this is great. And I came out that day, first ever time, with some money in my pocket. So I'd won and got that dopamine hit and high from it. And then over the course of the next year, as I was playing rugby and I'd headed down south for a very short period and then was back up north at Leigh, I was finding that I was taking myself off. I'd do train in the mornings, whatever, and then come 1-2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd find myself going off to the big casinos by myself, and there would be hardly a soul in there, and playing roulette and playing blackjack, and then winning some money, every so often, and going off and then going to Ted Baker, which in the Leeds shopping centre that I'd just been, and buying myself a product or something, and then doing the cycle time and time again. So every day we just kind of consumed with going to the casino initially.
Do you think it was? Do you think it's because you perhaps had more addictive personality than other people that you were doing this, or do you think you just started to get suckered in anyway?
Yeah, look, I think clearly however, also your personality and brain wiring and function has something to do with it for sure. I now come at this, and we'll come on to it, I'm sure, further down the line from a slightly different standpoint of view, because now so you are more likely, if you're a sports individual, so female or male, but you like that winning edge, you are more likely to participate in gambling. However, like at all addictions, if products are being made to be more addictive, then they're gonna sucker you in, and this is where I'm heading, or this is where I'm very much at now. Now what the bookmakers are doing are creating products that are highly, highly addictive, and therefore, if a bit like tobacco, people start off initially on day one by smoking a cigarette, but they're not addicted on day one, and the addiction builds up. And I guess the same applies with alcohol. I became addicted to gambling before the world of online had really accelerated. What really sent me on a very quick downward spiral was the access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And so how did that, as you got into your career and, you kind of had family, etc., how did that start to take effect? I know when we spoke before, you said that, it started to really take over and that you were, hiding evidence of what you've been doing.
Yeah. Look, I always hid it. So and that would suggest now and assessing it would be, I always knew what I was doing wasn't right. So I always knew consuming large parts of my day by, as I say, so going back to when I'm 41 now, so I'm going back to when I'm 18, between 18 and about 23, 24. You didn't bet online. So you went into a bricks and mortar bookie or you went into a casino. I was spending an inordinate amount of time, so maybe 2, 3, 4 plus up to 6, 8, 10 hours a day sometimes in the bookmakers, and then in casinos. Casinos were slightly more dangerous because the one in Leeds, for example, would have been open 24 hours a day. Bookmakers clearly have a cut-off point. So, whatever, 10 o'clock or whatever. But, I would be in there sometimes, being at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and not leaving until the very last race, and the shopkeeper was shutting the doors. And look, you'd meet people in the bookies and they'd be like-minded. So again, what you were doing is having the internal battles with yourself, going, oh, look, sure, everybody, these people are doing it as well. And I never really looked up. So I knew I had a problem with it, but I never quite knew what to do about that. And just figured, oh, look, I can have some balance and I can have some control with it. But then I'd just find that I never really had any money. Or I would have excessive amounts of money. And then, I would go and spend, and then I would be on extreme highs. Chasing all the time as well, chasing money. And yeah.
I was going to ask, you must have won enough that it kept you hungry for more. And I guess that's the nature of gambling, is that there's just enough to keep you hooked.
Yeah, look, I mean, you have days, weeks, even months sometimes where you're winning and it's great, and then you're going off and you're buying nice clothes. I'm talking about before it really accelerated, but yeah, of course. And going off to the race meets, going off to York races or Beverley races or whatever, there was a real buzz in it. And then, yeah, you come away some days and, you'd be several hundred into £1,000 up, and you'd be like, this is fantastic. And when you end up 2, 3, 5, 10 days, you haven't lost, you think you've figured out a system, right? And you think you've got this system that works. And then it takes one day for all of that money to be lost, because you get into this, well, 1 minute, that system, I've convinced myself this system works, and I'll just keep gambling and gambling. And then, as you see, hypothetically, if you've, over those 10 days, you've generated $2,000, $3,000, whatever, as that starts dwindling, you start going, no, I need to get beyond that for this system. I know the system. And then in the end, you just end up at zero again. And that cycle went on for years and years. And as I say, look, I lost 2 jobs inadvertently on the back of it. So having played for my country at under 18s, at rugby, at school level, and then rugby was going to be my career, and that's all I'd ever focused on. The reality was my attention was elsewhere, so I wasn't doing the extra stuff that you needed to do. So I was never going to kick on to to the right level. That became apparent. And then a short spell in the military there. And again, that came to an end because of gambling, actually linked to drinking as well. But gambling was the factor that took me off there. And then I set up a headhunting company, and this was a bit crazy because I'd gone into recruitment, and I worked for a company in Leeds actually for a short period of time, maybe 9 months. But I made a pretty significant placement with them in that time, and it was around breaking. It almost broke the company record. I'm not sure whether it quite did, but it nearly broke the company record on my first ever placement. I think it was about 65. I think it was around 65 to 70 grand invoice that the company sent out. Now I got a portion of that, so 15, 20%, whatever it was, so 6, 7, 8 grand, which was brilliant. But I figured I could do this myself pretty simply. So I set up my own recruitment, or my own headhunting company, and sure enough, I got into retail, predominantly food retail, and the credit crunch hit, and I couldn't have been in a better sector. So when everybody else was, any other sector was really tightening up, the food sector was on an upward trajectory. And I landed the gig for at the time, one of the big 4 supermarkets. And in essence, that made me an overnight multi-millionaire, made me an overnight millionaire. And all that allowed me to do was accelerate my bets.
So did you still feel in control at that point? Did you still feel you had a scheme? I'd be interested to know, at what point did you think, I've lost control now?
Yeah. So this was almost, I guess, a perfect storm. So I had access to vast amounts of money. And one thing I say about addictions, money's irrelevant. So if your family and the main breadwinner is earning €2,000 or £2,000 a month, and there's a family to rely on that, and the majority of that's being gambled away, that has a huge impact. And one thing I would say about gambling addiction, it wouldn't matter if you got access to £500 or 500 million. If you were seriously locked into that addiction, you would invariably be gambling it. And I think that's where gambling scares me more than other addictions, because, alcohol is terrible and drugs is terrible. And sure, drugs are slightly more expensive, but you try in a day, consuming 50 grand worth of alcohol, unless you go and buy some very, very fancy wine, it's not likely as an alcoholic you're going off spending, but doing 50 grand within 3 hours on American sport at 3 o'clock in the morning, I've done it. You are parted from your money very, very quickly in it. So the perfect storm came about because I'd landed this big gig at Morrison's, and as I say, that gave me access to vast amounts of cash and money. And then online gambling had really taken hold. So I had a betting account, but I would have been relatively good at picking rugby league bet, right? But what I would have done as an addict is won a great rugby league bet, and let's just say it was 10, 15 grand, and then I'd have gone and stuck all of the winnings on a dog running out of Shelburne Park or whatever, out of track lane, and I know nothing about the dog at all, which is part of the addiction. But I got shut down by because would lie and would lay off certain bets, but I was winning a lot more than, and I was staking high, so they shut me down. It's a completely different platform. So is punter to punter, as long as money's in the market, as in other punters come on, and it's a global system. So invariably you are, whatever sport it might be, the chances are you're going to get your money matched, and just take percentages off winners, losers, and take a percentage. So they're never going to shut you down. They've got a vested interest, even if you're good at it, to keep you there. If you're poor at it, they've still got a vested interest to keep you there. And the way the platform works and how you trade is incredibly addictive. And the fact you can, with horse racing, for example, you can actually bet when the horses are running and in play, and the whole buzz and hitting these dopamine highs throughout a race is It is phenomenal. And I mean, it's scary, really, when you kind of look back on how accessible or how easy it was to do. And now I look back and I don't feel like that was me. I kind of look back and go, how on earth? When I've been writing plenty of notes for the potential of a book. Yeah, sometimes sit and have to pinch myself and go, my goodness, how, and I'll give you when I say it's a great story or a great illustration of how bad how these dopamine hits work. So there was a day back in, I'm going to say 2016. I'm pretty confident it was, but anyway, it was Cheltenham Festival, and sure enough, the bigger events you would get excited. But I would have also been betting on, a race out of Windsor maybe that night as well, where nobody really had an interest. But the big festivals, you got excited. And one thing you did know is the big festivals, all the horses are turning up to win. So, they're not trying to fudge the handicapper, and they're not. So you kind of go, anyway, there was a day, it was a big day, and there was an owner called Rich Ritchie, and he had a big pile of horses with Willie Mullins, the Irish trainer, and these horses and they are four of his horses on the first day of the Cheltenham Festival, and all of them were the favourites. And I remember turning on the morning line all excited because it was Cheltenham, and I wasn't going to the track that day, but was going to head into the bookies to watch it and get the buzz. But obviously gone online to place my bets, and Willie Mullins Ruby Walsh, the jockey, was riding around in morning line, and he was saying, look, he said, if all three of the others let you down, this is your banker. Annie Power is your banker. Annie Power wins this for you. Believe me, this is the horse. This is the horse. And there he is riding, and you're like, brilliant. The day starts, and all three so I've got a 4-wayer on these, and I think I put about 10,000 quid on or whatever. And all three had won. So it was all down to Annie Power to win her race. And sure enough, Annie Power's coming around. And Annie Power is 30 to 40 lengths ahead of everything in the field, coming up the hill there at Cheltenham. And he's got one more hurdle to jump. She's got one more hurdle to jump in front of her. And the sun was setting, and it cast a false shadow. And Annie Power took off early and landed on top of it and fell. And so you're coming up the hill, and I was counting the money, and it made me want to. I think I was. It was around 50 or 60 or 70 grand or whatever I was about to make. And coming up the hill, I had it all. I was in debt. I owed money, and I was like, brilliant. This is the pressure off for months. This is for the next 2 or 3 months. This is 70 grand. Now, the reality is it wouldn't have been, but in my mind it was like this dopamine high. And then all of a sudden the horse crashes. Holy shit. And I haven't cashed out on any of the money. And so not only have I lost my stake, in my mind I'd won 70 grand, and then all of a sudden it had gone. And that type of thing hits hard when you're gambling.
And did you pick yourself up from that though? I mean, was that, do you learn when you're in that environment, do you learn lessons from that, or do you just forget that onto the next one?
Look, you level it all out, and you might, you lie to yourself. So, oh, look, it was really bad luck. There was all the conspiracy theories, because obviously plenty of people had got on this 4-wayer thinking this is brilliant. And so there was a conspiracy theory going, well, the bookies were about to lose 100 and some million quid if Annie Power won. So all the conspiracy theories going, it would deliver. She was put down, she was deliberately put down and whatever. And then you start kind of leveling out in your mind going, no, it was just bad luck. But, if we come on very quickly there to, where I now stand on this is, I came away from when I managed in 2019, and we'll come on to how that had come about. But when I stopped, what I did is went through the kind of 5 stages of grief, and the final stage is kind of acceptance. So is acceptance, and one of the things I did at that point was take massive responsibility for what I'd done, and how I'd let it consume my life, and how I hadn't reached out for help. I mean, that's another issue. Where do you reach out to help? And the longer you let it go on, the more odd you feel, and nobody else is doing this, and you're crazy, and all the rest of it. But it was about a year and a half after that, and I got talking to somebody who actually works great charity in the UK there called Gambling with Lives, and he and I were talking, and he went, "Mark, do you think you were groomed?" And I went, "What do you mean?" And he went, "But do you think you were groomed? Do you think you were exploited?" And I went, never really looked on it like this. And he said, "Well, just go away and have a think about it." And so it took me off on a bit of a path to go, was I? And when I then sat and started looking how it had operated with Betfair, came out and I went, God, I was completely and utterly exploited. You know, they were predatory. They knew everything about me. They gathered so much information on me as an individual. I got this confirmed by somebody who came out and was a bit of a whistleblower. And it took me back. And one of the ones that highlighted me was the Queen's Jubilee in 2012, where throughout the day, because of our mobile phones and having access to it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can gamble. So me with my family there was a lovely garden party in a nice village in North Yorkshire, and we were going off to it. As I always said, look, 99% of these things, I was always there. So I was always physically present, but I was mentally detached because my mind would be on my phone. What race is off next? And trying to hide it as well. So it's running. And then sometimes I'd go and watch the video, or sometimes I'd have my earpiece in, listening to the race or whatever. But anyway, so 2012, Queen's Jubilee, that day, I'd lost around 50,000 quid. And I got to the end of that day and I figured to myself, look, geez, you know, you've spoiled the whole day. You haven't enjoyed it. And look at everybody enjoying themselves, and everybody's now in the pub and having the time of their lives. And I would have joined in and then tried to be gregarious, which is would be in my nature and all the rest of it. But reality is I would have got drunk and then just acted up or whatever. But a lot of it was masking and covering up what I was doing. So I figured to myself, right, that's me, 50 grand, and you've spoiled this for yourself and you spoil it for your family, and this is shite. And so like, step away. And then within 72 hours, my VIP account manager came to me. Mark, there's 5 grand's worth of free bets in your account there for you, just to let you know. All right, mate, there you go. 5 minutes later, I'm logged into the account. And this happened dozens and dozens and dozens of times, giving me tickets to Rugby World Cup matches when it was the Rugby World Cup there in London, and sending me hampers from Harrods, but discreetly, to nice bottles of champagne all arriving from Harrods. I started to really assess it and went, God, this happened to me dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And they completely and utterly target. Every time I would have not been in my account for no longer than 72 hours, within 72 hours, they would have been on to me and given me something.
Is that legal? That's legitimate, is it, as a business practice?
I'm not sure across the water there. What I know there's been some clampdowns. Here in Ireland, we're just going through a gambling regulation bill, which I'm working incredibly hard at lobbying the government against the industry, who have been sent their lobbyists in within 1 year 60 times, so are fighting hard to protect their business model and protect, again, like Big Tobacco did, like the Sacklers did in America with the Oxycontin, gambling and going, no, we've just got to protect this as long as we can, and just got to exploit, because this gets us all very wealthy. I need my 30 million quid bonus. You give a shit on, kids committing suicide, 14 times more likely to commit suicide if you've got a gambling addiction. And it's scary, Philip, how the industry operate, but it's scary that they know how they're doing it as well. And when we talk now about, so they had lots of data on me. So one of the things was, Mark, we knew your wife didn't know. We knew exactly what sports really triggered you, so we could send you free bets for it. We knew we had a full profile on you. Let's take this into today's era. now, which is, as I say, I'm so fortunate that I'm gamble free there from 2019. You take that into today's era, right, where now they are using artificial intelligence to power their algorithms and gathering every bit of data on a customer they can. So there was something that came out on one individual, and then this became pretty obvious what they're doing. Within a short period of time, they can have 92 data points on a single customer. Well, go and find me another industry. Even I'm pretty confident big tech who were selling, obviously trying to sell to the advertisers, wouldn't quite get that. So what big gambling operators are now are huge data harvesting companies, and they're using that data to exploit young individuals. Because one of the things, and again, this has been part of my journey in understanding some of the neuroscience behind it, etc. The risk reward mechanism in the brain isn't fully developed until 25 years of age. So if you are running now, you are fundamentally aware of that. So if you can go and get a sports lad, go and get a sports lad whose risk reward function part of his brain is not fully developed, he's craving dopamine highs on a regular basis, and we can give them technology that takes that off the scale. So a study that came out was they used some of the platforms that were available and some of the gambling sites that were available, and it proved that a dopamine hit on an 18-year-old brain was greater than if they took a pure line of cocaine. So they're creating technology that's highly addictive. They're using they are targeting young individuals around it. What is the harm that's being caused on these brains? Because, you look at things, are we going to have a load of brain damaged kids in the future? Nobody quite knows. So, I look and think there's obviously going to be some studies, and tragically it's going to be around, as I said, you're 14 times more likely to commit suicide if you've got a gambling addiction. And I kind of got a theory on why that is. But they're going to do brain studies there, right, on somebody in a couple of years' time, and it'll probably be America that ends up being the landmark case in the way that America operates. And they'll realize that young individual's brain was just shredded by what had been put in front of them. And it's that side of it that scares me. And what scares me is that the industry know, in the same way as the big tobacco did, we know we're getting them hooked. We know we're getting them addicted. Sure, we've got plenty of money. We can lobby the government ministers. And again, my thoughts with government ministers, independents, brilliant, who genuinely go in and win the seat. When they're linked to a party, they play party politics. I've seen that happen in front of my very eyes. And they're also incredibly self-serving. So when I say that, they go in, I believe most politicians go into politics for the right reasons and thinking, I really want to make a change, I want to make good. And then they get in there, and then it's all about the next election. And it's all about them making sure they don't lose that office and they don't lose that seat. So what can I do, and how does this work? I'm sure the big gambling companies then start throwing money at them and use their power and the might, as I said, as tobacco did and alcohol have done in the past. Well, just be a little more relaxed with that, and be a little more relaxed with that. And look, we've got a bill going through here in Ireland at the moment. The last gambling bill was about 1956. This bill's really important, and it's vitally important. But I'm hearing words going, something's better than nothing. But if I can tell you now, the current bill that looks like it will pass completely leaves online gambling out of it. So given that business is 80-20, 80% of the market online and 20% bricks and mortar sale, they're leaving 80% of the market out of this, and the part which is really at risk. And what they've done, which again is just pure politics, and a lot of it's been set up by the gambling industry and put onto the politicians to go use this as a bit of a thing. They've over-regulated like community sport beyond belief. Over-regulated. So you run in a raffle like out of a local GAA or a local soccer club here in Ireland. You need a PhD degree. And you cannot, you cannot benefit your club particularly, you are put off at €10,000 for a competition. And there's been some great competitions. And again, as somebody who was highly addicted to gambling, these products aren't going to be the issue, but they've completely not regulated the bit where the harm's coming. And for me, it's scary that politicians can sit and not have a moral compass. And my job now is to make sure those politicians will never, I will not forget about them. And I will remind them as long, be them in politics or not, my job will be to remind them in 10 years, 15 or 5 or whatever period of time, you had a chance and you made a decision not to. And I think it's important that they hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go back to something you were saying earlier about the higher rates of suicide with people who have a gambling addiction. And I know we talked earlier about a moment you had on a ferry. Why is that? Why is that? Is it to do with the stress related to debt and to responsibility? And if people aren't talking about it, what's your theory on why those suicide rates are so high?
Yeah, so if we take the 3, and I'm aware there's many addictions, so I don't undervalue any. So if you've got an addiction that's negative, I am aware of the impact. But let's take alcohol, drugs, and gambling. If you've had an addiction to, if you've got an addiction to heroin, you've got an addiction to alcohol, you don't take that last hit of heroin or that last drink and go, this is going to solve my problem. As a gambler, that last bet, which was a 700 to 1 shot with 100 quid or 500 quid or whatever staked on it, I'm sat there thinking that will solve my problem. Then after that final time, you go, no, that's it. That is it. I'm at the end. If it's drugs and alcohol, albeit there is some mess in yourself, things look more positive and people around you go, well, this is brilliant. Gambling, the wake of mess you've left behind you and the lies that you've left behind and the debt and potential criminality and the most crucial being the harm you've done on your family, that there's a whole treasure trove of stuff that's going to come out. And therefore, you look and go, I don't have a place. In my opinion, I don't belong on this earth and I don't have a place. And people go, well, that's a really cowardly act. But actually, I don't see it as that. I see it as you feel like you have ruined everything and therefore you don't deserve to be here. And that's why I believe gambling is far outweighs the other addictions in terms of suicide. Say 14 times more likely because the mess you've left behind you and you can't see a clear path beyond it. You can't see a clear path to kind of move forward. And for me, that's what makes this addiction incredibly difficult. And I'll bring it back again. When you've got an industry and knowingly getting individuals into this and to hook them in and to reel them in and then spit them out. So just quickly go back to, so having had all these thousands in free bets and rugby and racing trips and free champagne, in the end, my money's dwindling. They are aware of this. So their whole system and the way their algorithms, they can see everything. So they can see, gee, he's running out of money here. And they knew with my job, they knew my contract had gone with the big supermarket and I was peddling around for getting other contracts. But obviously my mind wasn't focused on that because again, they can see how often I'm online. If I'm online gambling 12 hours a day, they know I'm not working. So then I become chasing them down, begging them for free bet. And in the end, Philip, I'm going from having gambled sometimes 30, 40, 50 grand in a day to begging them for paying them €15 or pound free bets. And sure enough, in the end, they just ghosted me. We've done you. We've resourced you. The bit where I realised I was groomed when I went through this recognition, not once did the welfare check me. Not once did they come to me and went, Mark, this doesn't look proportionate. Mark, we're aware you've got a contract with Morrison's and we're aware that you're earning big money. But Mark, you've lost 100,000 quid this month. that would look like, Mark, you've staked £1 million in bets, 33 grand a day in bets. That would look pretty disproportionate. We're now talking about medium-sized corporation as an individual entity doing £1 million in bets in a month. Nobody welfare checked. Nobody came in and checked. And for me, that's grooming. That is, and we know plenty of other places that groom. That is grooming.
So for anyone listening to this who, what you're saying resonate, or they think, I feel like that, or they know somebody who they, somebody knows someone who their, brother, son, daughter, whatever, who is, gripped by gambling addiction. What advice would you give to people, either to pass on or directly?
So be honest. Don't be afraid to ask somebody, and give somebody the opportunity to actually be clear that I have got this addiction, and that they're not alone. Because I think what this does, because it is so secretive, you're not sat in a pub now, you are doing it on your mobile phone, so you can hide. And as we know with how young people operate with social media platforms, it's all hidden. People need to know that they're not, and they are not isolated in what they are doing. Other people out there have this addiction as well. But talking to somebody, being 100% honest with yourself and being 100% honest with somebody around you is crucial. And the sooner you do it. So I'm doing some work across major sport now through the World Health Organization. And one of my remits is around major sports professional athletes. Because I said, have somebody come in and had a conversation in front of me in a group setting, only a very short, but pretty impactful. Look, this is what happened. And somebody had gone, here's my card. You reach out. So I would 100% have picked up the phone at 22, 23 years of age and rang that individual. So again, what the industry do is make this complicated. They're live again. So they sponsor companies like Gambling Care IE, completely funded by the industry. And what they try to do is make the onus completely on the individual. So it's the individual who's got the problem. It's not us as an industry. And these companies that are sent to help them, told to do that. That's part of the mandate of getting the money off them. That's harmful. So what I'm trying to lobby for here is there's an independent fund going to be made available. This fund needs to be to individuals who are completely independent. And there's a fantastic organisation here in Ireland called Extern who do lots of counselling completely independently. And they should be getting millions into there and building a team of people who can do this. And for me, they've made this difficult. And what I'm trying to do is bring coalitions together to go, let's not do this fragmented. Let's work together, because the industry love fragmented. They love individuals like myself to be fragmented, because they know it can just swat you away like a fly. And it's important that we do stand up to what's going on, because we know it's coming. So, this podcast, us talking, believe me, in 10 years' time, we'll be looking back at this going, oh my God, this is all pointed out. People know. And for me, it's scary that it's going on.
And what do you say to somebody who, somebody loved one, who isn't taking, they haven't admitted that they've got a problem? What do you say to them? What support can you give them? How do they help? Because they might be sitting there feeling helpless, just watching this happen.
Yeah, it's tough, because I think I found a lot of hitting rock bottom almost becomes inevitable with this addiction. But, I guess everybody's rock bottom looks different. So as I say, unless you're being honest with yourself, then you're in a tough place with this addiction. So, sure, you can try to go to somebody and say you've got a problem, or I think you've got a problem, or come on, look, I support some people and I'm not trained psychologist or anything, so I purely do it. And I work with some people that I worked with, and other people I've tried to work with, and my approach wouldn't necessarily. But I'm working with a couple of people here in Dublin at the moment who females actually whose partners have an addiction, and the partners won't admit it, and they will have the big soul. They will be the main income source, and they are scrambling around trying to get money to feed the kids or the mums at the end of the day. And my words are, they've got to get to a point themselves where they go, I have got a problem. I think most of us have that in them, but that's why, again, communication from the likes of myself who have been in that situation, rather than necessarily a partner saying it, pointing somebody in a direction to go, just listen to that, or listen to this podcast. You do know deep down inside. I'm yet to meet anybody who I've properly spoken to and gone, did you know? Yeah, of course I knew. Of course I knew. But I also figured, yeah.
I was going to ask you what your moment was. What did you do when you realised that you needed to do something, change something? What did you do? It might help, other people to hear that.
Yeah, look, in terms of when was my rock bottom, or
and what did you do next? How to kind of start the recovery, if that's the right word.
So I didn't know where to turn, and I didn't quite know how to deal with the wake of mess behind me. One thing I did know, and I was at rock bottom, as in, mentally and physically, I was just drained. I'd ballooned up to 20 stone in weight, and everything. Getting out of bed in the morning became, I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to do anything. And I figured to myself, we'd spend a lot of time in Portugal as a family and always associated it with good stuff. Good thing is with Portugal, I didn't have access to a bank account at this point. I'd literally drained everything. And I've got a few quid in cash, and Portugal doesn't have bricks and mortars bookies. So I kind of went, right, need to clear my head, and I need to be in a better, I need to get myself sorted out here, as in, because I'm no good for anything. And I thought, right, I'm going to take myself to Portugal, and kind of cold turkey this, and also just see whether, a change of environment and all the rest of it. Kind of, I can't really look back and say I got anything wrong with this, but anyway, I went off and I came by Ireland actually, and got on the ferry from Cork to Santander. As I got on the ferry, and it's a longish crossing, so it's nearly a 2-day crossing. And I was on it was a freight ferry, so it wasn't like it wasn't a holiday type ferry. It was a freight ferry, and getting to the cabin, I'm laid there, and then I come up onto the deck, and I was just looking, and it was, just figured to myself, where am I going? I'm actually heading to Portugal. I've got nowhere to live, and I've got a few quid here, and I'm in a beat up car with a few clothes in it. And I went, your life's done. You've got nothing. And this moment then was exactly what I've said, which was, that was my moment of going, you've got no way to ever recover from this. You've been at this from, you've had a problem for nearly 20 years of your life. Certainly from 16 up until 30, so 20 years of my life had been consumed. And I went, I've got nothing. I've run out of it. I haven't got a person in the world I can talk to. And, I burned friendships and relationships and all the rest of it. And I was, the biggest part of it then was thinking about my two sons who were a little older. And I kind of went, in my mind, I went, giving them everything in some way, because I got wealthy, but I've also taken it all away from them. And the poor boys have had no say in any of it. And that made me go, you are the most selfish. I mean, you questioned everything to do with my personality at that point, because I went, who does that? Who genuinely does that? Who prioritizes that gambling, that gambling over, feeding your kids or whatever? And the reality is, my mindset was at the time of doing that was, well, sure, look, if this wins, because I have won plenty in the past, and we're going to have a better time. But I was stood on the edge, and the reality was then I did think about that situation, and I went, if I do turn my life, my boys are just going to turn around and go, yeah, he did give us everything. He took it away, but he also died a coward, in our opinion, as well, because he did that. And as I say, I don't believe that is the case for gambling addicts taking their lives. But in my mind, I went, and that's when I started asking myself questions. So I got a rally of abuse off somebody who was like, you're just a coward, you're a coward, you're a coward, you're a coward. And trying to reaffirm it, and got a couple of very horrible messages saying, do yourself. And I started looking at myself again really seriously at that point. I went, am I a coward? I've been into some pretty tricky situations in the past, and I've got my head knocked off plenty of times on a rugby field. And am I a coward? And I guess, I'm not always just saying it's a physical thing, but I kind of looked and went, am I a coward? I went, not a coward. I've just lacked significant amount of courage over things that I could have potentially could have dealt with had I been honest with myself and had the ability to go and talk to somebody. And that's where the courage thing came from, and that kind of got reaffirmed by some of the people I spoke to. And I went, I just didn't have the courage. I didn't have the courage to talk and go and have a conversation with somebody. And that's what I implore anybody who's got this debilitating, horrific, horrendous addiction to do. If you do know, and the sooner you know inside, go and talk to somebody. Go and have that conversation. And that was my moment. That was my moment, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy there on. So it wasn't like this kind of came out and miraculous and all the rest of it, brilliant. Now we're all quite the opposite. And then I went through a very tricky phase of my life, a very tricky phase of my life, and I ended up with nothing. I had nothing at one point. I was fortunate because I ended up in the sun, so I could sleep on sun lounges to save a few quid on having to put a roof over my head. So at least I had the sun on my back and whatever. But then there was a moment that kind of then struck in this, which felt like I had an opportunity to rebuild from nothing. I almost felt like you actually have nothing. And in some ways, it felt like a bit of a relief as well. So I kind of felt like this is my opportunity now to start rebuilding my life. And and that's what I did. But again, that journey's it wasn't easy. Maybe 2.5, 3 months after starting that process, I met somebody who actually come out on holiday to the place, who was from Ireland, and we got talking, and it was pretty transparent about what I'd been through and how things were looking. And this person saw something in me, I guess, and said, look, I want to spend time with you. And we built our relationship on that. But it was the first person I've ever had in my entire life who been 100% honest with. And the relief of that has been phenomenal. And then we've been very fortunate that then in 2020, we found out we were having a baby and had a little girl come along. And, I don't diminish my responsibility to my boy. And I feel like I've let my boys down tremendously. But also then with Isla, it's almost been like I knew I was a terrible role model. I knew my actions and what I was doing were incredibly poor. And how could I have ever educated my kids correctly if I wasn't living by those values and rules myself? And one thing with Isla there has been that, I've got to live the life. I've got to live every single day. And sure, I'm going to be trolled, and there's going to be people who are going to try to come after me, negatively, and people who are going to slam me down and throw things up from my past. I don't care. I don't care in that respect, because I know every day if I am honest and I get out of bed in the morning with purpose and I'm helping people along the way, I can go to bed on a night, genuinely put my head on the pillow, and I'm sleeping. I sleep now better than I've ever slept in my entire life, because I know all my actions are honest. And sure, I've got a past, and I regret massive amounts of it, but I also can't undo that. I can't go back and relive it. And so that's done. And somebody had said to me, well, how do you deal with that, Mark? Because that must be, how do you deal with that side of it? And I said, well, here it is. I said, if you go and apologize with absolute sincerity once, but you mean it and then you live your actions follow that up, you can't do it anymore. Not everybody's going to forgive you. And I get that. There's people who've done things against me who I don't forgive necessarily. Something happened the other day where, I was incredibly trolled and found out it was somebody who knew me. And I've lived in my life for the last 4 years. And that was incredibly hard. But you make that sincere apology and you make sure your actions then back that up. And it's not for their benefit, that backing up with the actions. It's, then you are honest and you're sincere. And that's the way I've lived my life, certainly for the last 4 years.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important message, for anyone listening to this, that, there is something you can do, and it's not easy, but you're testament to that. So thank you for sharing that, Mark. And thank you for sharing everything today and joining us. And good luck with everything. Good luck with the lobbying that you're doing. Good luck with changing things. It sounds like there needs to be change. And thanks for joining us.
No, look, thank you, Philip. And as I say, look, I've built a nice coalition. I've been fortunate that some incredibly powerful from the world, the Director General of the World Health Organization who reached out to me and got me involved with them, and the Kennedys and the Kennedy family in America, specifically Patrick Kennedy, and even the Vatican and the Pope has done a video around this. This is a subject in the Vatican that for 10 years they've been studying, and he's put his weight behind me and go and be the public voice of it. I am very blessed. And some great politicians. Now, there's some not great politicians, but I've also, some great politicians, specifically here in Ireland, who have got behind me as well. So, look, I'm very blessed. But part of that is, I believe it's because everything I do now is transparent and honest, and I'm doing it. I'm doing it for purpose, and I've got great faith. So, God has sent me on a path, and all I ask is that He gives me the strength to get through each challenge.
Good. Thank you. Good luck. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. If you or someone you know is struggling with gambling addiction, Mark mentioned a couple of organisations in the UK and Ireland. There's Gambling with Lives, which is www.gamblingwithlives.org, and Extern, so www.extern.org, and look for the Problem Gambling page. In the US, you can visit the National Problem Gambling website, www.ncpgambling.org, or call the National Problem Gambling Helpline, which is 1-800-GAMBLER. If you have a story to tell and you think your experience could help others, then please get in contact with me either via the website mid-lifemen.com or email me at midlifemen01@gmail.com. Finally, please share the podcast if you enjoy it with people you know. And if you've enjoyed listening, then please rate or like the podcast, because it helps raise its profile and reach many more people who might benefit from the stories that are shared by my guests.